Hey guys, tonight we step into a world where the night hums like a bellows, and the air tastes faintly of smoke, earth, and something metallic, something alive. You're standing just outside a West African village, centuries ago, yet somehow the crickets still sound like they do in your backyard. There's a glow ahead of you, soft, pulsing, orange-red, a forge, and beside it, a figure moves, steady and unhurried, like he's been here for 1,000 years. You probably wouldn't survive 5 minutes in this heat, honestly. Between the smoke, the weight of the air, and the temperature that makes your eyebrows consider spontaneous combustion, you tap out before the first hammer strike. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge closer, the dirt under your feet giving way to warm sand peppered with ash. The forge isn't a grand building. It's a low clay structure shaped by hand and smoke, breathing through twin bellows that puff rhythmically like sleeping lungs. A goat bleats in the distance, unimpressed by this nightly ritual the villagers say that every strike is a heartbeat of the earth. They whisper that the smith isn't just a craftsman. He's a healer, a counselor, maybe even something closer to a magician. And in truth, you can sense it already. There's something ritualistic about his rhythm, something almost musical. The forge doesn't just shape metal, it shapes people. You watch him turn a lump of iron into the outline of a hoe, sparks flaring, a constellation at his feet. A small boy beside him pumps the bellows, his movements automatic, reverent. You can tell this has been taught, not in words, but through rhythm, through muscle memory. In the faint flicker of firelight, this isn't labor, it's choreography. And then you start to notice what's happening around him. The forge, it turns out, is a bit like a neighborhood cafe, minus the Wi-Fi, plus molten metal. Villagers drift in quietly, not always to commission tools. A man leans in close, muttering about a quarrel with his wife. The smith nods, never pausing his hammering. Another person brings a small chicken and a handful of herbs, not for forging, but for blessings. The forge, you realize, is both therapist's office and confessional booth. The hammer punctuates the advice. Clang, don't speak in anger. Clang, don't forget her patience. Clang, iron only. Historically, in many West African societies, like among the Mande, Yoruba, and Dogon peoples, the blacksmith's role extended far beyond craft. He was a mediator, healer, sometimes feared, often revered. The very act of controlling fire gave him status. After all, he worked with the element of transformation. And transformation, in a community, means power. Not the kind that wears crowns, but the kind that keeps people from tearing each other apart over goats, gossip, or grief. A mainstream fact, in pre-colonial Mali and Guinea, smiths were part of specialized castes, Nyamakala, keepers of power and energy. They handled metal, words, music, and ritual, and the belief was that they managed Nyama, a spiritual force connecting all living things. They understood how to bend energy, both literal and emotional. So, if your hoe broke or your marriage did, you went to the same man. The forge smoke curls upward, mixing with stars. It smells sharp, like rust and rain. You can almost taste the minerals on your tongue. You remember reading somewhere that fire purifies, but this fire feels more like a mirror. It reflects the village's tensions, joys, and quiet hopes. The smith listens to them all. At one point, a young mother approaches. She carries a small charm, iron, shaped like a crescent. She wants it reforged. For protection, she says softly. The smith doesn't ask from what. He already knows that everyone here needs protection from something, sickness, spirits, or just the chaos of daily life. He sprinkles powdered iron into the fire, murmuring words that sound like a melody too ancient to have lyrics. Sparks dance like fireflies. Somewhere, a drum beats faintly. It's as if the whole night has joined in this ritual of making, of remaking. You think of how, in your world, therapy happens in quiet rooms with soft chairs and tissues. Here, therapy is loud, glowing, metallic. Healing hums like a furnace. The advice is shaped in sound and repetition. The smith doesn't interrupt. He lets the rhythm speak first. A quirky tidbit. Archaeologists once found iron slag buried beneath shrines in parts of Burkina Faso and Ghana, suggesting that blacksmiths sometimes buried the waste from their work as offerings. It was symbolic, acknowledging that creation always leaves behind residue, and that even mistakes have a place in the spiritual cycle. You can't help but smirk. Imagine if every time you burned a dinner, you held a tiny ceremony for the charred lasagna. The night deepens, and the forge becomes a kind of heartbeat for the whole settlement. Even people who aren't here can hear the rhythm from their huts, and somehow, it comforts them. The sound says, life continues, iron bends, problems cool. There's a moment where the hammer stops. The smith steps back, letting the iron rest. You notice his expression, half focus, half meditation. You realize he's not just shaping a tool, he's maintaining balance. The forge is both workplace and altar. And maybe that's what makes him the village's unwitting therapist. He listens without needing to reply, offers help through creation rather than correction, and reminds everyone that everything, people, metal, feelings, can be reshaped if given enough heat and patience. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths' elevated social position came from fear or respect. Were they revered because of their spiritual power, or isolated because they were seen as too powerful to mingle freely? You imagine both can be true. After all, nobody feels entirely comfortable around someone who literally makes thunder in a pit of dirt. The fire flares brighter as another piece of iron takes form. A hunter arrives, carrying an old spearhead, its edges dulled by time. The smith nods wordlessly, places it in the coals, and begins again. You hear the hiss of cooling water, the faint whisper of steam rising like ghosts. The hunter sits nearby, saying nothing. Maybe he just came to sit close to someone who understands the silence of work. A child drifts off to sleep against a wooden post, soot smudged across his cheek like war paint. His dreams probably sound like hammer strikes. Somewhere in those dreams, perhaps, he's already a smith himself. You can feel the weight of time settle on your shoulders. It's not oppressive, it's grounding. The world has changed so many times since this moment. Yet this rhythm, this pulse of fire and patience, feels eternal. The forge crackles. A few villagers laugh softly at a joke you can't catch. The air feels thick with meaning and iron dust. You start to realize that this is therapy in its purest, oldest form. Community and craft woven into one act of care. The smith glances at you, as if to say, everything you carry, you can shape again. And just like that, you understand why the forge is always warm, even when the fire sleeps. The forge fades behind you like a glowing ember as the night cools, but its rhythm follows you, a soft pulse under your skin. You wake to the smell of dew on red earth, roosters tuning their voices, and a faint column of smoke curling once more from the smith's yard. The day begins the same way the last one ended, with the sound of iron remembering its purpose. You wander back toward that sound, stepping over sleeping goats and half-finished mats left to dry. The village is stirring, women fetching water, children dragging kindling, men arguing lightly about the market road. And through it all, the smith's fire burns again, steady, confident, older than all of them. You realize something. No one tells the blacksmith when to start. He simply wakes, listens, and decides when the ancestors are ready for fire. The man himself greets you with a nod, sweat already slick on his temples. His apprentice fans the embers while he sprinkles dry herbs into the coals. A scent fills the air, sharp, resinous, a little like incense mixed with burnt honey. You ask, half joking, if it's for luck. He smiles without looking up. For memory, he says. The ancestral spark, it turns out, isn't a metaphor here. Among the Mande and Dogon peoples, blacksmiths claim descent from beings of fire, spirit kin who taught humans how to control chaos. The smiths call them by different names, but they all mean the same thing. Those who first coaxed lightning from stone. To the villagers, each spark from the forge is one of those ancestors saying hello, or perhaps reminding them to behave. The smith gestures toward a small clay pot near the fire, its lid sealed with soot and cloth. Inside, he says, sleeps the first ember of his lineage, passed down from father to son. That ember has been kept alive for generations, rekindled with each new forge. You can't decide whether it's superstition or genius, a literal family flame. And yet, as you watch it glow, you start to feel the weight of continuity, the hum of something deeply human. He tells you that the forge is not merely built, it's consecrated. When a new one is made, elders bless it with millet beer and sacrifice the smallest goat in the herd. The blood stains the earth, the fire drinks it, and the smith whispers names of those who came before. Historians still argue whether such rituals were meant to feed spirits or simply to mark the seriousness of work. But you sense that, here, there's no real separation between sacred and ordinary. Fire, for them, is both tool and deity, destroyer and healer. The blacksmith's hammer rises again, glinting in the early sun. He moves with confidence, but also with restraint, like someone who knows he's not alone at the anvil. Fire remembers, he murmurs. You imagine every spark as a tiny ancestor, offering advice, probably about your posture. A mainstream historical fact. In many parts of West Africa, smiths were central figures in mythic genealogies. The Dogon tell of Namo, the first beings who descended from the sky, bringing with them iron and speech. For the Yoruba, Ogun, god of iron and war, embodies both creation and destruction. It's said he cleared the first path through the wilderness so civilization could follow. The smith, in working with iron, is thought to channel that divine act of order-making. You can't help but smirk. That means every time the smith fixes a hoe or sharpens a blade, he's reenacting the origin of civilization. Meanwhile, you struggle to fix your Wi-Fi router without divine intervention. The forge hums. A woman arrives, carrying a basket of millet. She pours a little into a wooden bowl near the fire, an offering, a thank you for last season's harvest. The smith accepts it with a nod, but doesn't pause his work. Gratitude, here, is as constant as breathing. Then comes an older man with a limp. He lowers himself onto a stool and begins talking softly about a dream he's had. A fire leaping into a river and refusing to die. The smith listens, his hammer tapping slower now. You watch as he blows on the hot metal, turning it, cooling it, listening not just to words but to tone, to silence. He finally says, "The dream means you've forgotten something that still burns." The old man laughs, half in recognition, half in fear. "Maybe my youth," he jokes, but you can tell he believes the forge has hurt him. It's odd, you think, how therapy sneaks up in different disguises. Here it's dream interpretation beside an anvil. In your world, it's talking about burnout over herbal tea. Different props, same longing for clarity. The apprentice drops a piece of charcoal and the fire flares. You step back instinctively, and the smith chuckles. "It only bites when you lie," he says. You can't tell if he's teasing you or the fire. A quirky tidbit. Some old smithing clans forbade their members from eating certain foods, like chicken or yam, because they believed it dulled their spiritual senses. Others claimed that lightning avoided striking a blacksmith's hut, respecting kinship with the same energy. Of course, historians debate whether that's myth or meteorology. But still, you find yourself glancing at the sky, just in case. The forge, now fully awake, seems to breathe with its own will. Every exhale of the bellows feeds the flames. Every inhale draws in the morning breeze. The rhythm feels alive, like the world's oldest meditation track. The smith begins forging a blade, long and elegant. As he works, he talks. Not to you, not even to his apprentice, but to the metal itself. The words sound like both scolding and encouragement. You hear phrases like, "Don't resist," and "Be patient." It's strangely comforting, like overhearing someone coaxing life into existence. You realize that this act, this conversation between man and element, is the same conversation that shapes human relationships. When things get heated, you listen, apply pressure, cool down, repeat. Therapy, blacksmithing, it's the same process in disguise. The smith lifts the finished blade, holds it to the light, and smiles faintly. He dips it into water, and steam rushes up like applause. Around you, the village seems to take a collective breath. A group of children peeks from behind a wall, their eyes wide. One whispers, "That's Ogun's whisper," and the others giggle. You grin. Kids everywhere have the same way of mixing all with play. The smith sets the blade aside, motions for his apprentice to rest, and sits down beside the fire. His skin shines with effort, but his eyes are calm. You sit, too, feeling the quiet settle around you. He begins to tell you about the first fire his grandfather ever lit, how they carried embers wrapped in banana leaves when traveling, how the spark was never allowed to die. If the flame dies, he says, so does the memory. The thought lingers. How much of our world, you wonder, depends on keeping something small alive? A flame, an idea, a story. The forge crackles again, almost as if answering. And as the morning passes into noon, you realize the truth. In this world, heat isn't just temperature, it's connection. Every ember links the living to the dead, the practical to the spiritual, the hammer to the heart. The blacksmith rises again, ready to shape something new, and you feel the hum return. The ancestral spark has passed from fire to forge to you. You breathe it in, and for a fleeting moment, you could swear you hear voices in the smoke. Warm, amused, ancient. You don't notice it at first. The way the air changes when someone approaches the forge carrying their troubles instead of a piece of metal. The smoke curls differently, as if sensing tension. You stand there, hammer in hand, realizing this little corner of the village is less about fire and iron and more about confession. The sound of your hammer isn't just a rhythm for work, it's a rhythm for healing. The villagers know it, even if they don't say it aloud. They drift in quietly, pretending they need a horseshoe mended or a knife sharpened. But really they come because it's easier to talk over the sound of clanging metal. You nod, you listen, you hammer. Somehow, by the time the blade gleams again, their burdens feel lighter. The irony isn't lost on you. Literally, you shape iron while reshaping spirits. Blacksmiths across West Africa carried this same dual role. In the Mande-speaking regions, the Numu, the smith, was both craftsman and counselor, keeper of secrets, and sometimes the only person brave enough to tell uncomfortable truths. One mainstream fact scholars agree on is that the Numu caste was often hereditary, passed from father to son, but the emotional labor wasn't written down. It was simply expected. The forge was the therapy couch of its day, minus the soft lighting and the hourly rate. You smile when you think about it. Somewhere in another village, another smith might be doing the same, pretending not to notice tears mixing with the sweat on someone's brow. It's a strange kind of intimacy, this relationship built around fire and silence. Sometimes, though, the conversations turn strange. One man insists his wife is bewitched. Another believes his harvest failed because his ancestors are displeased. You, standing there with soot on your face, have somehow become a translator between the visible and invisible worlds. Maybe, you murmur, you need to make an offering. You're not entirely sure who you're advising, him or yourself. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths truly held formal roles as mediators in disputes, or whether that reputation grew later through oral traditions that blurred memory and myth. What's undeniable is the reverence and suspicion they inspired. To handle iron was to flirt with danger. To speak truth while doing it was to tempt something deeper. There's a story told in a small village near present-day Mali about a smith who could mend a man's courage as easily as a broken blade. They said he'd whisper over the fire, not words exactly, but something halfway between speech and hum. The sound wasn't for the living alone. Supposedly, the ancestors listened too. When the village faced drought, people didn't go to the priest first. They went to the forge. The hammer rang out prayers more sincere than any chant. You imagine that scene vividly. The forge glowing against the night. A crowd outside pretending they're there for tools, but really soaking in the comfort of consistency. Clang, hiss, breath, repeat. Therapy through repetition. A quirky little tidbit floats through your mind. In some places, smiths refused to eat their meals with others, believing that food could dull their fire, their internal energy that linked them to the forge's spirit. It sounds eccentric, but maybe they were just practicing early work-life balance. When you lean back and let the hammer rest, your ears keep ringing. Silence feels heavier than metal. The villagers linger, they always do. You offer water, gesture toward the shade, pretend it's about politeness. But you know they're not ready to leave yet. Their problems still need a little more heat. There's one boy who comes often, too shy to speak, always carrying something broken, an arrowhead, a buckle, a blade. He watches you work as though he might someday understand the trick of turning something useless into something strong again. You wonder if he knows that the same principle applies to hearts. Across the region, oral traditions describe blacksmiths as guardians of balance. If a community fell into chaos, they'd be called to perform rituals involving iron and fire to cool the village, restore harmony. Imagine that, not a mayor, not a soldier, but a smith wielding a hammer and wisdom in equal parts. You think about how that balance feels now. Each strike you make is an echo of centuries of rhythm, metal meeting meaning. Sometimes, when the night is quiet and the coals still glow, you swear you hear other hammers answering in the distance, a continent-wide heartbeat keeping time. Then there's the part no one talks about, the toll it takes on you. Being everyone's secret keeper, the one who absorbs other people's pain while shaping metal that outlives you. It's noble, sure, but exhausting. You catch yourself staring into the fire a little too long, wondering if it's listening back. Remember the crocodile dung sunscreen? You whisper with a grin, recalling an earlier tale of ancient inventiveness. The thought makes you laugh softly. People always find strange ways to survive the heat, whether under the Egyptian sun or by the forge's glow. Survival's the real art form, you think. As you work, you start humming. One of those low, repetitive tunes that fill the space between words. It's not a song exactly, more like an exhale with melody. In the old days, smiths believed certain rhythms could calm the metal's spirit, making it less likely to fight the hammer. Some modern metallurgists might roll their eyes, but deep down, even science admits vibration shapes matter. Maybe you think the same is true for people. Maybe that's why they come here, drawn by the rhythm, the warmth, the illusion that transformation is contagious. Later, when the last visitor leaves and the forge dims, you sit there in the flickering orange. The coals sigh. The air smells like iron, sweat, and something strangely clean. Hope, maybe. It's easy to romanticize it now, but you know the truth. You're as flawed as any of them. The difference is, your flaws come out beautiful when struck hard enough. Historians may still argue whether the blacksmith's wisdom was philosophical or purely practical, but you don't need a consensus to know this much. The forge doesn't lie. Heat reveals everything: impurities, strength, resilience. People aren't so different. You rise, stretch, and dust your hands off, feeling that ache deep in your shoulders. Tomorrow, more villagers will come. More confessions, more broken blades. More therapy by firelight. You'll be ready mostly. The night wraps around you like a heavy blanket. Somewhere, a drum beats faintly, echoing the rhythm you've been keeping all day. You grin to yourself, same tempo, different instruments. After all, you think, by the time dawn stains the horizon with ash-pink light, you're already awake. The forge hasn't cooled completely. Its coals glow like half-open eyes. You breathe in the faint tang of iron dust and realize the day doesn't begin here. It's merely resuming. The ancestors, they say, never really sleep, and neither do their forges. You shuffle through the packed earth floor, toes brushing bits of charcoal, and you can almost hear a whisper, not words, exactly, but something that hums beneath thought. It's in the hammer, in the tongs, in the way the anvil gleams before sunrise. If you've been doing this long enough, you stop questioning it. You just listen. Across West Africa, that hum carried centuries of belief. The blacksmith wasn't just a maker. He was a mediator between the visible world and whatever lay shimmering just beyond it. Among the Yoruba, the god Ogun ruled iron, war, and creativity all at once. A portfolio so wide that only fire could keep it organized. One mainstream historical fact stands out. Ogun's worship spread far beyond smiths, into the hearts of hunters, soldiers, even modern mechanics. You grin a little. He'd fit right into an auto shop, swearing at a stubborn engine block. But for you, here in the rhythmic quiet of the forge, Ogun isn't a statue or a myth. He's the breath in the bellows, the pulse in the hammer. Before every major job, you touch the anvil lightly, a quick prayer disguised as routine. Not because you're pious, but because metal remembers arrogance. A young woman arrives early, carrying a small bundle wrapped in cloth. She looks nervous. Inside is a bracelet, iron, cracked right through the center. You glance at her, then at the piece, and you both know this isn't about jewelry. She wants a reconciliation charm reforged, her marriage mended along with the metal. You nod. No words. Just the hiss of water, the flare of heat, and that same whisper weaving between you. It's in moments like this that the forge becomes a temple. The villagers don't bow, but they wait respectfully, knowing that sparks carry more than light. They carry intentions. In some traditions, smiths mixed bits of old iron from sacred places into new work, believing the past could fortify the present. Quirky? Sure. But so is wearing your grandmother's ring for luck. Humans always hedge bets with sentiment. You remember an elder once telling you that every time a hammer strikes, an ancestor listens. You weren't sure whether that was comforting or unnerving, but you started speaking softer afterward, just in case. The old folks say it's why smiths rarely lie. The dead have excellent hearing. Historians still argue whether blacksmiths truly performed initiation rituals or if later storytellers exaggerated their mystical status. Some claim they merely provided the tools, the knives, the bells, the symbolic objects, while priests led the rites. Others insist the smiths were the priests, their fires burning where temples couldn't. Either way, the result's the same. You end up at the center of everything sacred and dangerous, wielding both heat and humility. Mid-morning, the forge grows hot enough to blur the air. Sweat stings your eyes, but you keep going, because ritual doesn't stop for comfort. You whisper under your breath, half chant, half habit, as the iron softens. There's something meditative about it. Each spark looks like a tiny spirit escaping. You imagine them carrying messages skyward like fiery pigeons. Therapy and Wi-Fi combined, you mutter with a grin. No one laughs, but the coals crackle approvingly. The woman waits, hands clasped tight. When you hand her the repaired bracelet, it gleams as though it never broke. She thanks you quietly, slips a cowrie shell into your palm, and leaves without looking back. Payment made, blessing given, transaction sealed. You sit again, watching the smoke curl upward, tracing invisible patterns. Somewhere above, clouds form, heavy and bruised with rain. You think about how many generations looked at this same dance of smoke and sky and saw a conversation. Fire sending words up, rain answering down. In some communities, blacksmiths performed ceremonies before the first harvest, their forges symbolically cooling the earth's anger after the hard labor of planting. People feared that without such balance, tools might break or injuries might multiply. You can almost feel that old anxiety, a world constantly negotiating between creation and destruction. And yet, despite all this reverence, there's suspicion too. You've heard the whispers that smiths keep secrets too deep, that their blood runs hotter, that they walk too close to things humans shouldn't touch. There's a fringe story, maybe apocryphal, about a smith who could hear when someone lied near the forge because the fire would flicker blue. You tried it once. The flame stayed orange. Maybe you're surrounded by honest people, or maybe your forge just doesn't gossip. The rhythm of your hammer slows as thunder murmurs outside. It's strange how the sound blends with your own beat, nature keeping time. You glance up, half expecting lightning to strike your anvil in cinematic fashion. It doesn't, of course, but you imagine Ogun smirking somewhere, pleased with your theatrical mind. Evening comes, and the air turns metallic in your throat. The village quiets, preparing for a small festival, drums, dancing, firelight. You know your part in it. Before the first drumbeat, someone will call you to light the ritual fire. Not because you're the most pious, but because only you can coax flame from stubborn coal. When that moment arrives, you step forward, strike the flint, and feel a shiver as the first spark leaps to life. The crowd cheers softly, the flames rise. For a second, everyone's faces glow gold and red, and you can't tell where the humans end and the spirits begin. A child asks if the ancestors are watching. You want to say no, to keep things simple, but you see the fire sway, as if nodding yes. So you shrug. Probably, you say. Behave. Laughter ripples through the crowd, easing the tension. Ritual or not, humor always finds a way to sneak in. You think of it as emotional ventilation, a necessary draft in the forge of faith. As the celebration continues, you stay by the fire's edge, hands still blackened, eyes half closed. You can almost feel the heartbeat of the past pulsing through your tools, through the earth, through you. It's humbling and a little terrifying, because if they're still listening, you have to keep your side of the conversation going. The night ends the same way it began, with smoke, sparks, and silence. You rake the coals carefully, whispering thanks that no one hears, but maybe someone does. You lean back against the cool wall, tracing the scars on your palms. Each one a reminder that power always asks for a price, even when that power comes wrapped in firelight and folklore. And as you close your eyes, the forge still murmurs, ancestral lullaby, static connection, spiritual hotline. You drift in its warmth, halfway between exhaustion. The morning arrives like a gentle nudge, lights spilling over the rooftops and brushing the forge in soft gold. You trudge barefoot over packed earth, feeling the cool dew bite at your toes, and already the forge hums as though anticipating your presence. It doesn't matter if you slept. The village knows your work never truly stops. Even when your body wants rest, your hands remember the rhythm, the weight of the hammer, the pulse of metal, the hum of possibility. A man approaches, limping slightly, holding a broken hoe and a worried frown. You nod, already sensing that his problem extends beyond iron. He starts to speak of his son, his worries tangled like roots in a tree, but you let him pause. You take the hoe, place it gently on the anvil, and begin tapping. The sound fills the open space, rhythmic and hypnotic, echoing against clay walls and thatched roofs. Each strike releases tension, the vibrations subtly reaching the man as if the tool itself were soothing his worries. Mainstream history affirms it. West African blacksmiths were often regarded as vital to the well-being of their communities. Their influence extended beyond tools and weapons. They advised on everything from agricultural strategies to marital disputes. It's no exaggeration to call them therapists in every sense of the word, though few modern scholars emphasize this side of their practice. You glance at the man, noting the crease in his forehead. As the metal bends beneath your hammer, he begins to speak again, not about the hoe, but about his fear of failing as a father. You nod silently, striking the iron in tandem with his heartbeat, or at least it feels that way. The rhythm steadies him. There's no judgment here, just the sound of metal giving way to gentle, quirky tidbit. Some smiths claimed that the sound of hammering could massage the soul, an idea that seems eccentric until you notice how the villagers' shoulders relax almost immediately in the forge's presence. Whether metaphor or early prototherapy, the effect is real. You hum a little, matching your hammer's cadence to the invisible pulse of their emotions. Historians still debate whether the Numu's advisory role was formalized or an organic result of communal dependence. Did people come to the forge for counsel because the smiths were trained, or because they had nowhere else to turn? You suspect both. Either way, the results feel tangible. A child wanders in, shy, holding a splintered toy sword. You take it gently, examining the fractured wood and jagged edges. As you work, the child fidgets beside you, eyes wide at the dance of sparks. You talk softly, not to instruct, but to soothe. By the time the toy is repaired, it looks almost new, its personality intact, but stronger for its repairs. The lesson isn't lost on the boy. Pain and pressure can create resilience. Meanwhile, the man with the hoe laughs lightly, perhaps for the first time in days. He gestures to the now repaired tool and says, "It feels right." You don't comment. Your hammer continues its steady conversation with them. In the village, the blacksmith's role extended even further. Weddings, harvests, rites of passage, these were occasions for the forge to be present. Metalwork symbolized endurance and continuity. An iron bracelet for a bride, a sharpened spear for a warrior, or a repaired hoe for a father. They weren't just practical objects. They were carriers of reassurance, signs that life's rhythm remained intact. A quirky observation: some smithing clans forbid speaking during certain forging tasks, believing words could distort the energy flowing from iron. Others whispered the names of ancestors with every strike. You find yourself muttering a name now and then, just to see if it feels heavier or lighter, and it somehow does. The afternoon passes with a cadence you could map in your sleep. Hammer, hiss, sweat, breath. Villagers drift in with small troubles, an argument between brothers, a lost goat, a bad harvest prediction. You guide them subtly, matching the weight of your strikes to the intensity of their concerns. By evening, everyone leaves lighter than they arrived, their shadows stretching long and soft in the setting sun. There's one moment you remember vividly. The smithing master from your childhood village once said, "Every problem is iron. It bends, but only if you hammer it right." You repeat it to yourself as you lean against the wall, letting the hammer rest, the coals smoldering quietly beside you. The day's last visitor, a woman carrying a small, cracked pot, approaches slowly. You sense her hesitance. She doesn't speak at first. Instead, she sets the pot on the anvil and steps back. You inspect it, nod, and begin the careful work of mending. As the cracks close under your touch, she whispers stories of her ancestors, of marriages, births, and losses, letting the forge absorb every word. Historians still debate whether the smith's ritualistic practices, like whispering over repairs, were spiritual or purely symbolic. You suspect the distinction doesn't matter. The act itself carries weight, whether faith, psychology, or sheer human attention. The repaired pot gleams in your hands, and so does her relief. By nightfall, you sit quietly, hands blackened and blistered, coals glowing faintly. The village sleeps around you, unaware of the quiet miracles that passed through the forge today. You inhale, letting the iron-scented air fill your lungs, feeling the cumulative warmth of labor, empathy, and patience. It's a delicate balance. The hammer shapes metal, and the same strikes shape people. You close your eyes briefly, imagining the echoes of all who came before, their stories embedded in the iron. It's exhausting work, this gentle therapy, but infinitely rewarding. The wind outside carries the faint scent of smoke and earth. You feel the day's quiet magic settle over you like a soft cloak. The forge hums, as if whispering a lullaby. You lean back, letting the exhaustion and satisfaction merge. The villagers' trust, the ancestral sparks, the hum of metal, all of it converges here, in this sacred, ordinary place. You understand, more than ever, why fire was revered, why iron commanded respect, and why the blacksmith's hands could heal more than just broken tools. And as night falls completely, you drift in the lingering warmth, soot on your skin, heart steady, mind silent. The village has quieted into a soft murmur, the kind that carries only in whispers and the occasional creak of a distant hut. You pad barefoot to the forge, finding it already awake, coals smoldering in gentle anticipation. Shadows stretch long across the yard, contorting familiar shapes into strange, fleeting creatures. You pause, letting your eyes adjust. In the forge, shadows are allies. They hide mistakes, exaggerate sparks, and sometimes, if you believe, they hold secrets. You bend over the anvil, lifting a slightly warped spearhead from the day's collection. It's not broken badly, but it bears the memory of its previous life, dense like wrinkles on an old face. You tap lightly with the hammer, listening as the metal sings under your hands, each note a promise of renewal. There's a rhythm to secrets, too. You know that the villagers trust you with the quiet parts of themselves, the ones they don't share with neighbors or relatives. A mainstream historical fact comes to mind. Blacksmiths across Mande and Dogon regions were often privy to intimate details of village life. Their role extended beyond crafting tools to safeguarding information, offering counsel, and mediating disputes. The forge became a space where anonymity and trust intertwined, where words were absorbed as much as metal was shaped. You hear a faint shift behind you. An older woman approaches, carrying a small leather pouch. You sense her hesitance before she speaks, the way she clasps her hands as though the secrets inside could escape if she loosens her grip. Inside the pouch are coins and a tiny iron charm, cracked along one edge. She places it carefully on the anvil, and you nod. No rush. The work is deliberate, slow, almost sacred. Quirky tidbit. Some smithing families believe that iron could absorb not only physical force but emotional energy. A broken tool, when repaired, wasn't just restored. It held the echoes of every worry, fear, or hope that had touched it. You smile faintly, imagining the villagers' hidden anxieties dancing invisibly between hammer and metal. You strike the charm, light tap after tap, listening to the faint resonance. It's a different kind of music than the larger pieces, delicate, nuanced, almost a whisper. As you work, the woman talks softly about her absent husband, the arguments she hides from neighbors, the debts that make her pulse quicken. You don't comment. Your hammer doesn't interrupt. The metal receives, the rhythm soothes, and the shadows seem to lean closer, cradling the moment. Historians still argue whether such practices were ritualistic, practical, or an instinctual blend of both. Were blacksmiths consciously mediating emotional energies, or did their presence simply calm the community through familiarity and authority? Either way, the effect is undeniable. You pause for a moment, wiping sweat from your brow. The forge glows orange in the darkness, coals flickering like the heartbeat of the village itself. Each shadow dances differently, depending on the spark you release. Each tap of the hammer creates a rhythm that feels older than memory. You almost expect a spirit to emerge from the smoke, nod in approval, and vanish before anyone else sees. A boy peeks from behind a wall, curious about the soft sound of metal singing. He clutches a small, bent knife, left over from yesterday's mischief. You beckon him forward and hand him a hammer, just a light one, for practice. You guide his hands gently, letting him experience the subtle push and yield of iron. The process itself is comforting, teaching more than force. It teaches patience, focus, and quiet respect for what holds weight. The woman watches quietly as you finish the charm. It's mended now, stronger than before, and she can almost feel the worries she placed there dissipate, carried away by your deliberate movements. She nods, leaves a small gift of millet, and retreats without a word. You watch her go, feeling the forge's energy pulse a little slower now, the rhythm softening with the absence of visitors. There's a peculiar magic in how secrets and metal intertwine. You think back to a fringe tale from a nearby village, a smith who could read the history of a tool just by listening to its vibrations. It sounds fanciful, but you notice things, tiny dents, scratches, mismatched welds, that whisper stories to anyone willing to observe. The forge is a repository, an archive of human intent and error, and you are both librarian and archivist. The wind shifts outside, carrying the scent of wet earth and distant cooking fires. You can hear faint laughter from children playing near a riverbank. The forge is quiet now, but alive, holding the traces of every conversation, every silent worry that crossed its threshold today. You strike a few more gentle taps on the spearhead, listening to the resonance, and realize that healing isn't just about words or ceremonies. It's about continuity, about presence, about rhythm. The villagers might leave the forge with their tools fixed, but they also leave lighter, steadier. They carry forward the same pulse that courses through the coals, through the hammer, through the air itself. As night deepens, the forge exhales a final sigh of embers. Shadows stretch across the walls, now calm and unthreatening. You rest your hands, feeling them sticky with soot and energy. Every scratch, every burn mark, every subtle dent on the anvil is a story, a lesson, a secret shared. Even in the quiet, you know tomorrow will arrive with more visitors, more stories, more need for hands that can mend metal and hearts alike. But for now, the forge and its secrets belong to you alone. You sit back, feeling the warmth seep into your skin, the shadows leaning in as though to listen to your own thoughts. And as the night winds settle, you realize the truth. In the forge, nothing is ever lost. Secrets are stored, energies balanced, hearts lightened. Every tap, every spark, every whisper in the smoke carries intention. You close your eyes briefly, inhaling the iron-scented air, and the forge hums softly in reply. Somewhere in the darkness, you imagine a long line of ancestors nodding, approving the careful attention to both tool and spirit. Morning stirs slowly, stretching across the village in soft amber waves. You step into the courtyard, the earth still damp with dew, each footprint imprinting a temporary story on the soil. The forge waits like a patient friend, coals smoldering, tools arrayed neatly. The rhythm of the day settles in your chest before you lift the hammer, a heartbeat syncing with the pulse of the village itself. You begin with a familiar piece, a plowshare that has seen too many seasons. As your hammer strikes, the sound carries through the narrow streets, bouncing lightly off clay walls and thatched roofs. Children pause their games to watch, marveling at sparks that leap and vanish like tiny fireflies. You let the rhythm take over. Strike, hiss, inhale, strike again. The song of iron becomes indistinguishable from the song of life in this place. A mainstream historical fact: across West African communities, blacksmiths often dictated the tempo of village life, their forges acting as a clock, a gathering place, and sometimes a makeshift council hall. Work, ritual, and counsel were interwoven seamlessly, and the clang of iron announced both labor and presence. You chuckle softly. You've never seen an actual clock in these villages, but the smith's hammer never lies. You glance toward the marketplace. Vendors arrange baskets of millet, yams, and peppers while gossip trickles like a stream between stalls. Their movements seem slightly slower when your hammer is ringing, as if the rhythm resonates outward, aligning everyone's pace to a gentle, unconscious beat. You note it quietly, amused. Who knew therapy could be auditory, tactile, and communal at once? A man arrives with a broken hoe blade, but it's not just about the tool. His expression hints at tension carried home from a stubborn neighbor dispute. You nod, examining the damage, but your focus isn't solely on metal. The hammer sings against the steel, each strike releasing a tiny pulse into the soil beneath your feet, and somehow, the man exhales before he realizes it. He mutters something about old quarrels, then lets them fall into the air. You let the moment linger, savoring the simplicity of easing burdens without saying, "Quirky tidbit." In some villages, smiths would beat rhythm into drums with their hammers, claiming that the vibrations not only shaped metal, but could align human moods. The notion may sound odd, but you notice the villagers' energy softens, their steps sinking to the forge's accidental drumline. Perhaps it's physics. Perhaps it's magic. Probably a bit of both. Historians still debate the extent to which blacksmiths intentionally influenced communal behavior versus the effect emerging naturally from shared attention to rhythm, craft, and authority. You think it's mostly intentional. You feel it. Every subtle shift in tempo, every flick of a spark, every pause for breath carries an unspoken guidance. You pause briefly, wiping sweat from your brow. A child lingers near the anvil, fidgeting nervously with a small blade. You hand them a light hammer and guide their hands gently. Strike, pause, repeat. You feel a rush of amusement. This is essentially a one-on-one masterclass in both patience and humility. The boy's eyes widen as the metal bends obediently under the right pressure, learning that persistence and care often accomplish more than raw force. The village carries on around you, unaware that much of their daily rhythm, from selling yams to shepherding goats, dances subtly to your unseen metronome. Villagers drift in, carrying both tools and tales. Some are mundane, mended baskets, sharpened knives, but others are heavier, unspoken worries masquerading as practical requests. You can feel their weight, their tiny tremors, and you let your hammering absorb them, the clinks and clangs shaping not just iron but temperament. A woman arrives, carrying a small clay pot with a hairline crack. She sets it gently on the anvil, a silent plea in her posture. You examine it, your hammer waiting like a patient partner in a slow dance. As you work, she tells a story, quiet, hesitant, about her children, their laughter and squabbles, and the fear that comes with responsibility. You hum a low tune, letting it merge with the hammering. Sparks fly, rhythm softens, and the crack is erased. When she lifts it, the gleam of ironwork reflected faintly in the clay seems almost symbolic. The vessel, and the worries it carried, has been strengthened. The coals glow softly as the day matures. You pause, leaning on the hammer, watching smoke drift upward, twisting and stretching like long-forgotten memories. Somewhere, the faint sound of a drum calls children to play, but your hammering has already left a lingering echo in the village's movement. There's a magic in this repetition, a quiet consistency that reassures everyone, even those too shy to step forward and admit it. Quirky observation. Some elders swear that if a blacksmith hammers in an irregular rhythm, misfortune follows. Tools break, crops fail, tempers flare. It's likely superstition, but you indulge it, keeping a steady, comforting tempo, feeling the invisible pulse of expectation guiding every strike. Night creeps in. Shadows stretch long across the village, and the forge exhales a gentle heat, almost protective. You lean back against the wall, soot on your hands, sweat cooling on your skin, feeling the pulse of the village flow through the coals and tools. The rhythm of the hammer, once purely functional, has become something more, a bridge, a pulse. You hum quietly, thinking about the stories, the worries, and the laughter that have passed through your forge today. Each tap of iron isn't just a repair. It's a rhythm in the collective heartbeat of the village. And as you watch the shadows, you realize the forge has become a place where continuity, ritual, and gentle authority intersect seamlessly. The first light of dawn creeps through the leaves, spilling mottled patterns across the forge floor. You pad over the rough earth, toes brushing ash and stray bits of coal, already aware that the day won't wait for hesitation. The forge hums softly, a familiar warmth rising from the coals. You inhale deeply, tasting the metallic tang mixed with dust and dew, and it feels like the village itself is breathing in rhythm with you. You pick up a half-forged spear, its tip uneven, the shaft scarred with small dents. It's not just wood and iron. It carries stories of hunts, disputes, and protective charms. You tap lightly with the hammer, listening to the song it sings. Each strike is a conversation, each spark a tiny acknowledgement. The ancestors are here too. You feel it, their presence woven invisibly into every strike, every pulse of fire. Mainstream history notes that blacksmiths in West African communities were often the keepers of spiritual knowledge. They understood ancestral lineages, ceremonial timings, and symbolic craftsmanship. They didn't just make tools, they reinforced the invisible threads connecting generations. Your hands, blackened with soot, trace patterns almost subconsciously, as if honoring these unseen connections. A woman approaches with a broken necklace, her movements careful, hesitant. You know this isn't about ornamentation. The beads carry blessings, memories, and a silent plea for continuity. You take the necklace, placing it gently on the anvil. The metal clasps and chains clink softly, echoing like distant bells. You begin working slowly, feeling the vibration of each tap. Quirky tidbit. Some smiths believe that iron could record conversations and intentions, storing them within its very fibers. When repaired, the object could release this energy, acting almost like a spiritual playback. You smile faintly, imagining gossip replaying from a repaired spearhead. Perhaps it's superstition, perhaps an early form of psychological reinforcement, but in this space, belief carries tangible weight. Historians still debate whether these spiritual practices were deliberate attempts at psychological influence or simply cultural narratives that added gravitas to a smith's authority. You suspect the answer is both. The villagers don't question it. They arrive with trust, leaving their problems in your hands, confident in the hammer's rhythm and the forge's quiet wisdom. You strike the necklace carefully, listening to the metallic song, letting it sync with your own heartbeat. Each tap seems to release tension not just from the object, but from the woman's posture, her hands unclenching slightly. Sparks float lazily in the air, tiny stars suspended, lighting the smoke like miniature lanterns. You can feel her shoulders relax. In the background, children giggle while attempting to forge tiny toys of their own under the guidance of an apprentice. Their laughter mingles with the hammer's song, creating a symphony of sound that's half discipline, half play. You watch them, amused, noting how rhythm teaches lessons subtly: patience, focus, precision, and even resilience. The forge seems alive, responsive to every motion. You pause occasionally to wipe sweat from your brow, savoring the tactile feedback of metal yielding under your hammer. It's an intimate dialogue. The object speaks, you respond, and somewhere between strikes, understanding passes. A man arrives carrying a weathered blade, rust eating at the edges. His eyes dart nervously, hinting at the unrest that brought him here. You accept the blade and begin tapping methodically. As the metal warms and bends obediently, he speaks softly about worries too delicate for public discussion. You listen without judgment, letting the hammer's rhythm echo like a heartbeat of reassurance. Quirky observation: some elders swear that the forge can mirror emotions, reflecting the inner state of anyone who approaches. While likely a poetic metaphor, you notice subtle truth. Tools repaired under tension feel different, and those handled with care seem lighter. You allow the idea to linger. It's comforting, and in a world full of uncertainty, comfort is rare. By midday, the village moves with a subtle cadence influenced by the forge. Sellers pace slightly slower. Children's laughter aligns with the hammer's rhythm. Even the animals seem attuned to the vibrations you send through the earth. You grin, muttering, "Who needs a clock when you have a forge?" The idea seems absurd, but the results are undeniable. The woman returns to retrieve her necklace. She holds it carefully, eyes brightening as she feels its weight restored, as if the repair renewed more than just beads and wire. You nod silently, a subtle smile tugging at your lips. There's no need for fanfare. The object, the intent, and the forge carry the message perfectly. Night approaches, coals glowing faintly, painting walls in gold and black. You lean back against the forge, hands tired, mind softening. The village hums around you, unaware of the unseen threads you've been reinforcing, the connections between past, present, and the subtle future. Ancestors, you realize, are not silent witnesses. They are quiet partners, shaping the world through rhythm, presence, and gentle insistence. The shadows lengthen, stretching across the walls like protective fingers. You exhale, feeling both exhaustion and satisfaction. The forge, alive in its muted brilliance, hums a soft lullaby. You rest, hands still warm, soot-dusted palms open to the ambient night air. Iron, ancestors, and invisible threads, interwoven into a single tapestry, alive under your careful watch. And as you finally close your eyes briefly, the forge seems to murmur its approval. Tomorrow will bring more visitors, more objects, more secrets. But tonight, the threads are strong, the iron sings quietly, and the village rests a little lighter, held together by rhythm, fire, and your careful, steady hands. The morning arrives in a haze of orange light and birdsong. You step into the yard, feeling the familiar uneven ground under your feet, cool yet firm, dotted with tiny pebbles and stray bits of coal from yesterday. The forge hums faintly, coals still glowing from a partial night's fire. You inhale the earthy, metallic aroma, letting it settle into your lungs, feeling it anchor you to the rhythm of the village. A young man approaches, carrying a thin iron chain, bent and twisted from use. You take it carefully, your hands already blackened with soot, and begin the gentle, precise tapping that will restore it. The chain rattles softly under each strike, a small, comforting percussion accompanying your focused movements. It's more than just metal work. It's a ritual that shapes intention, calms nerves, and conveys unspoken understanding. Mainstream history confirms that West African blacksmiths often acted as mediators. Their forges were places where disputes could be aired and resolved, where advice flowed as freely as the sparks. The blacksmith's hammer wasn't just a tool for metal. It was an instrument of community cohesion. Your hammer sings as you work, sending a rhythm into the earth that resonates quietly through the surrounding huts. You glance at the young man, noticing the tension in his shoulders. He's not just seeking repair for a chain. He's seeking reassurance, guidance, a measure of stability. You nod silently, understanding that the physical repair is inseparable from the emotional support. Sparks float lazily into the air, reflecting the mid-morning sunlight, creating tiny, momentary stars that dance briefly before fading. Quirky tidbit: some smithing families taught apprentices to interpret the sounds of metal as indicators of mood or intent. A high-pitched ping could suggest stress, while a deep, resonant clang often indicated calm. You chuckle softly, listening to the chain as if it were singing a lullaby for the young man's anxieties. Historians still argue whether these practices were intentional psychological tools or coincidental byproducts of skilled craftsmanship. You think the distinction is trivial. The effect is palpable, and that's what matters to those who approach your forge seeking more than just repaired tools. A woman arrives with a splintered wooden stool. She sets it carefully on the anvil, the wood creaking slightly under your attention. You begin to hammer lightly, coaxing the fibers back into alignment, reinforcing them with subtle metal braces. As you work, she talks quietly about her day, mentioning the market, the children, a minor quarrel with a neighbor. You listen, letting the rhythm of hammering absorb her concerns, allowing the repetitive, steady beats to work like a gentle metronome for her mind. The forge seems to expand around you, a quiet sanctuary where time slows. Each tool you repair, each piece of iron bent and shaped, carries stories that ripple through the village. Even objects without humans nearby seem to hold memories. You tap a small, jagged blade, and it resonates faintly, echoing the laughter of a child who had played with it weeks ago. Quirky observation: some smiths believe that tools could hold grudges if not treated properly, a superstition that you indulge with a knowing smile. You tap carefully, whispering soft encouragement to the iron, feeling a subtle shift in weight and tension. Whether the object forgives or not, the process soothes. As noon approaches, more villagers arrive, each carrying a combination of practical and symbolic burdens. You notice that the forge's rhythm begins to influence the entire compound. Children pause their games to watch the sparks. Chickens step lightly around scattered coals. Even the river's soft babble seems to sync with the hammer's pulse. You can't help but chuckle, a whole village dancing subconsciously to the beat of iron. A young woman approaches with a broken bracelet, delicate and ornate. It's clearly not for utility, but for sentiment, and she handles it as though it contains fragments of memory. You take it gently, positioning it on the anvil, and strike with care. The metal responds with soft musical taps, a counterpoint to the hammering of larger tools around you. She watches, silent but visibly eased, as the bracelet's continuity is restored. Historians still debate whether these emotional effects were recognized consciously by blacksmiths or simply observed and utilized instinctively. You suspect it was both, a practice refined over generations. Each strike, each spark, each subtle vibration teaches the apprentice, and yourself, that metal work is inseparable from the human context surrounding it. By late afternoon, the forge is alive with quiet energy. Villagers drift in and out, leaving lighter than when they arrived. Tools are restored, objects are strengthened, and emotional burdens are subtly eased by the steady presence of iron and hammer. You pause, leaning on your tool, and glance around at the soft glow of coals, the long shadows, the soot-streaked faces of those who've lingered a little too long. There's a gentle magic here, born of rhythm, care, and consistent attention. You think back to a story your grandfather once told, about a blacksmith who repaired a community's confidence alongside their plows and swords. The lesson seems clear. Forging metal and forging bonds are two halves of a single sacred act. Your hammer strikes once more, soft but deliberate, echoing into the approaching evening. And as night creeps over the village, the forge glows quietly, each tool carrying a subtle pulse of energy and trust. You inhale the iron-scented air, feeling connected not just to the objects but to the generations, the rhythms, and the invisible threads that bind people together. Twilight descends slowly, stretching long purple shadows across the village courtyard. You trudge toward the forge, feet brushing dry grass and stray pebbles, your hands still blackened from hours of hammering. The coals glow faintly, reluctant to give up their warmth, as if they know the day isn't quite finished. You inhale deeply, tasting the mingled scents of iron, ash, and earth, and feel a quiet, steady pulse beneath your feet, the heartbeat of the village itself. You pick up a battered machete, its edge dulled and nicks marking past struggles. It's a tool that has seen heavy use, and you recognize the subtle tremors of fatigue in its metal, a minor resonance that betrays every swing and scrape it has endured. You tap gently with the hammer, listening carefully to its song, coaxing strength and shape back into the worn blade. Sparks float lazily into the cooling air, drifting like tiny fireflies before vanishing into the dusk. A mainstream historical fact: blacksmiths in West African communities were often respected as keepers of both physical and social stability. They didn't just repair tools, they maintained social order, arbitrated disputes, and were consulted on matters ranging from harvest planning to marriage negotiations. You feel the weight of that legacy in your hands, knowing the hammer you wield shapes not only metal but the rhythm of human interaction. A young man steps forward, carrying a broken farming hoe. He hesitates, fingers curling around the worn handle, as if releasing it might reveal more than just the tool's flaws. You accept it without comment, positioning it carefully on the anvil. Your hammer sings, slow and deliberate, each strike a soft punctuation to the unspoken trust between smith and villager. The metal bends obediently, and you notice his shoulders relax, tension flowing into the rhythm of the forge. Quirky tidbit: in some villages, smiths whispered that repaired tools carry echoes of their owner's intentions, a kind of residual energy that could influence future work. You can't help but imagine tiny sparks of hope or frustration lingering in each blade, invisible yet perceptible. Perhaps it's superstition, perhaps historians still argue whether these beliefs were ritualistic embellishments or practical ways of instilling respect for craftsmanship. You know the effect is real. Tools repaired with care often perform better, and humans, unwittingly, feel lighter after entrusting their burdens to the forge. A woman arrives carrying a small clay pot, a family heirloom cracked down the side. She handles it reverently, as if the object contains generations of memory. You place it on the anvil with soft caution, letting the metal braces kiss the clay at the break. As your hammer taps the iron in slow rhythm, she murmurs stories about ancestors, lost loves, and small victories no one else remembers. You listen, letting the pulse of your work absorb the weight of her words, turning tension into tangible sparks that fade into the evening air. The forge seems alive, attuned to every movement, sound, and breath. Each hammer strike sends vibrations through the earth, a gentle drum that echoes in walls and hearts alike. You watch children peeking from behind mud walls, daring themselves to approach but remaining safely curious, absorbing rhythm, learning patience, watching ritual unfold. The forge is a classroom, a sanctuary, and a bridge between generations, all in one heated, soot-streaked space. Quirky observation: some elders believe the forge remembers the people who approach it, a living archive of the village's daily joys and worries. You nod silently, considering how every repaired tool, every softly tapped charm, carries forward a story that exists in both metal and memory. You feel a certain pride, a quiet satisfaction that extends beyond craftsmanship. It's stewardship of both material and human worlds. As the sun finally dips beneath the horizon, the forge glows one last time, coals bright enough to cast long flickering shadows. Villagers have begun to retreat to their homes, carrying tools and stories lighter than they arrived. You take a final breath, soot-dusted palms raised to the cooling air, feeling the forge's warmth seep into your own bones. Every hammer strike, every spark, every whispered secret has stitched a subtle pattern into the fabric of the community. Historians still debate whether blacksmiths wielded real social influence or if their authority arose from symbolic perception alone. Standing here in twilight, you feel the truth in neither extreme. Your work has tangible effects, and belief amplifies it. Iron and intention, rhythm and presence. These are your instruments, shaping the village quietly, persistently, and without fanfare. You lean back against the anvil, allowing your body to relax fully. The forge hums a soft, fading note, a lullaby of heat and metal. You close your eyes, remembering the stories, the sparks, the invisible threads that weave people and objects together. Outside, crickets begin their evening chorus, harmonizing with the residual vibrations from the forge. And as darkness settles, you understand that forging isn't just about tools. It's about bonds, trust, and subtle transformations. Every person who entered the forge today leaves altered, as does the village itself. Iron has carried more than weight. It has carried intention, emotion, and quiet healing. The rhythm of hammer and hearth continues in the hearts of those who have witnessed it, even as they drift back to daily routines. Tonight, the forge exhales a gentle warmth, and you rest, knowing that the invisible threads between ancestors, villagers, and metal remain intact, quietly pulsing, ready to guide tomorrow's footsteps. You inhale once more, tasting soot and firelight and satisfaction, letting the day's labors dissolve into calm. The village is hushed now, the forge cooled to a gentle ember glow that flickers softly against mud walls. You sit back on the edge of the anvil, letting your hands rest, feeling soot still clinging to skin and the slow warmth lingering in your bones. The air smells of iron, ash, and earth, a comforting blend that reminds you of continuity, of generations who shaped tools and lives in this very space. Outside, the night hums gently, crickets, distant frogs, the rustle of leaves stirred by a tender breeze. Every sound seems amplified in the quiet, each one a gentle punctuation to the day's rhythm. You think back to the villagers who passed through today, their small worries, their unspoken fears, their tiny celebrations hidden in mundane requests for repair. The forge has absorbed all of it, like a sponge for the human condition, releasing tension and sparks, in rhythm, in the soft pulse of metal under hammer. Even the shadows seem to lean in, settling into stillness, as if the night itself respects the delicate equilibrium restored in these hours. Your mind drifts, softening, letting the pace slow. The invisible threads connecting ancestors, villagers, and objects feel tangible here, humming quietly beneath your awareness. Tomorrow, they will reawaken, bringing new tools, new stories, new trust. But for now, everything rests. The forge exhales, the village breathes, and you let yourself sink fully into the gentle cadence of completion. And as you close your eyes, the last flicker of ember glows, leaving warmth, rhythm, and a lingering sense of connection. Sleep would be easy here, in the quiet sanctuary of hammer, iron, and heart, where every beat of metal carries intention and care.